I got to be honest with you guys, like, and this might sound really stupid, but I'm really excited for this Eagles season. Just for the fact that I don't know what anything is.
Just like the newness of it.
The newness. We had shed. Yeah, I would sit there and write these games on Sundays, and I'd be home with my wife. She'd be chasing our 2-year-old around, and I'd be miserable. I'd be like, I cannot watch another game of this, like, slop. And, like, Twitter arguing about Carson Wentz, and I'm going to hear about Nick Foles again, and Doug Pederson, and all this stuff. They wiped the slate clean of all of that. So I don't know a damn thing about Nick Sirianni or what Jalen Hurts is going to be. I watched him hang 55 on my team in person. That was the game in Oklahoma where the wagon fell over. I don't know if you guys saw that video, but I saw that in person. But I'm excited because I don't know what any of this is. So I'm going into it with zero expectations, you know? And remember, like 2017, we went in with zero expectations too. And those are the most exciting years that you can have, because you can't, when you don't have any expectations, you can't be disappointed. So I don't, Nick Sirianni may not be that great. Jalen Hurts may not be that great. But right now I'm looking at this team and saying it's the great unknown. And I'm intrigued by that because I don't know what the hell any of these guys are. And I don't know what they're going to do in the draft. So it's kind of rejuvenated me. It's like brought back my lifeless, like, corpse. And now I'm actually interested in, like, writing about the team again for the first time in a while, you know?
Thursday edition of Birds 365. Macca, John McMullen, Jody McDonald, hanging with you. Countdown is on to the Eagles draft. Will the Eagles as an organization have it together enough to have a winning day on draft day? I should say days because it is Thursday, Friday, Saturday affair with a whole bunch of picks coming on Saturday. Here to give us some insight to the Birds and commentary or two about where they're sitting these days on the dysfunction scale is our buddy from Crossing Broad. He covers it all for Crossing Broad, but we've got him in the Eagles crosshairs today. Kevin Kincade joins us here on Birds 365. How are you, KK?
What's good, Jody? What's good, John? I got the baby off to the nanny, and the coffee's finally starting to kick in, so I feel like I'm ready to go.
All right, good to hear, Kevin. We see how the content machine gets it done. You churn out so much stuff. So.
It's not pretty, yeah, but it's effective. Whatever gets you through the day, you know.
Kevin, I did want to bring you on because I thought your take was interesting, especially in the wake of the Athletic article from Sheil Kapadia, Zach Berman, Bo Wolf, and they've been on with us over the past couple of days. So. A lot of talk about the Eagles' dysfunction. A lot of fans out there want to get some therapy. You kind of talked them off the ledge a little bit and mentioned 2015. Hey, things were far worse. I mean, Tom Gamble was getting escorted off the parking lot because he couldn't get along with Howie Roseman.
Yeah.
And they won the Super Bowl 2 years later. So I think it was an interesting point, and kind of expound on that, your thoughts on why this isn't that big of a deal.
Well, let me give you the genesis of it. You know, that take just sort of came out of nowhere because yesterday Adam Schefter went on another radio program, and the host was asking him about the Athletic article, and Adam kind of downplayed it a little bit for two reasons. Number one, I mean, the Athletic is a competitor, competing outlet, so he's not a guy from ESPN is not going to sit there and go gaga over something else that somebody wrote. I mean, to his credit, he said it was a good story and it was well reported, right? The other thing is that there's this belief that Howie Roseman gives information to Adam Schefter, so he's going to downplay it and he's not going to rip the general manager.
And he does, by the way.
Yeah. So I just sat there thinking to myself, like, look, I think everybody's justified in feeling unhappy about what the Eagles have been over the last couple of years. But I think the difference in my mindset is that I have looked deep within myself and I have found an inner peace and an inner sanctuary with the fact that Howie Roseman ain't going anywhere. Like, he's not going anywhere. So I can sit here and be mad about something that I know is not going to change, or I can try to compartmentalize Howie's tenure into different blocks over 10 years or 12 years or however long it's been. And you don't have to look too far back into recent history to say we called them dysfunctional when Chip was fired, when Howie was removed from the broom closet and reinstalled, right? We called them dysfunctional after 2012. True. And the Dream Team debacle and all of that. And they turned it around and they came back and they went 10-6 in Chip's first year. So, I mean, we've seen evidence in the past of instances where this era of Eagles football has kind of naturally run its course, and then they've kind of corrected and hit the reset button, and they've been able to build it up again. So, I mean, when you get over the obvious justified disappointment of what they've been over the last couple of years, and you go back and you look at these iterations of the Birds in recent history, you can feel okay about Howie being in a position to kind of build it back up again.
Here's the reason why you're right, but I will defend Eagle Nation if they are a little bit more put off than they used to be. You're right. They've been there, done that, overcome it, and gotten to the peak of the mountain. But that's the rub. They got to the peak of the mountain when we've had the ups and downs, and every franchise has its peaks and valleys in their history. You deal with it. But when the peak is the Super Bowl and you valley out as quickly as you do, and it costs a good man like Doug Pederson his job, and I'm really rooting for Doug Pederson to get another job. Twofold. Number one, because he's a good dude. And number two, I want to see if he was as good a coach as some of us think he was when he was here, and that he was woefully mistreated when he was pushed out the door by the Philadelphia Eagles. Is Doug Pederson going to do what Andy Reid did? Now, I know they're two separate things. Andy Reid's time had come. He had a decade and a half. I'm not complaining about the Eagles moving off Andy Reid, but he did go win a Super Bowl somewhere else. I'm wondering if Doug Pederson can do something like that. I believe that's why Eagle fans are a little bit more put off this time by a dysfunction outbreak, because the guy who won the Super Bowl on the sidelines for the Eagles lost his job because of it.
No, I mean, it's insane to think that we went from building a statue of this guy to he was fired 2.5 years later, 3 years later. I mean, you're right, Jody, the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows. It was like being on the world's biggest roller coaster. You know, how do you go from that to that in such a short amount of time? That's why people feel the way they do. So I understand that. But I think we can also go back and look at the patterns over history, and we say that after Howie was banished during the Chip Kelly years, obviously they overcorrected in a very significant way by hiring a coach that they felt like they could have some control over. Didn't even let him hire his own defensive coordinator, fired the quarterback's coach and the offensive coordinator. So I think within those patterns of that, nobody should be surprised to say that Howie and Jeffrey Lurie always want to have the control, So they hire an inexperienced Doug Pederson that flames out naturally. Now they hire an inexperienced Nick Sirianni because this is who they are, and they want to have that modicum of control, and they want to be the guy. And I think part of the reason I downplay it too is because when I was reading the Athletic article by Bo and Sheil and Zach, I was having nightmare flashbacks to when I covered the Philadelphia Union, and they did the exact same thing. Looked for, asked the staff for their phones and threatened to go through their phones and see who they were leaking to. Not work with the coaching staff, and the CEO was bringing in his own players and signing his own players. Look 2 years ago to Burnergate with the Philadelphia 76ers. They were a total mess then, and now they're first place in the Eastern Conference 2 years later. So I think it's you're right, Jody, that these peaks and valleys are significant. And that's why people should feel a way that they do about the Eagles. But oddly enough, I think that happens more frequently than people realize.
Kevin, you mentioned at the beginning you wanted to compartmentalize when it came to Howie Roseman and the different stages of his sort of tenure. But then you mentioned Howie Roseman, Jeffrey Lurie, and that is sort of the underlying thing to me, because in a lot of ways I've compared Howie as the local version of Roger Goodell is to the NFL owners. I think Roger Goodell's importance is as a lightning rod for the people with the real power. Think about NFL criticism. Everybody looks at Roger Goodell. Everybody kills Roger Goodell. They don't kill the people with the real power. Here, everybody kills Howie. Jeffrey is making these decisions. Shouldn't he be the guy getting the angst?
Yeah, he should be, and I think it's shifted a little bit more towards that way as more original reporting comes out, where we get these nuggets that show how involved he was. As a counterpoint, we could sit here and kill Jerry Jones year after year after year because he goes in front of the media after every game, says a bunch of stupid things that end up on Crossing Broad, and we get a lot of clicks on it because people like that kind of stuff. But we didn't really have the full extent of the story of how involved Jeffrey Lurie was. So we weren't going to go kill him in the same way, and by extension, it was Howie by proxy, who was eating a lot of that criticism. Now, as we piece it together and say, okay, maybe he's been more involved than we think, you can then go back in history and kind of apply that to different situations and say, okay, well, maybe he had his fingerprints on this a little bit more. The Black Ops thing about Alec Hallaby reporting directly to him. Okay, there's another nugget that helps us kind of put the whole story together. But I think this reputation that Jeffrey Lurie had of being a decent guy who was charitable and generally progressive during the whole White House, Colin Kaepernick stuff at the same time made people look at him not necessarily the same as you look at a guy like Jerry Jones. So I think just naturally Howie ate a lot of that criticism because he was the guy in the public spotlight.
KK, you did a good job of explaining your own mindset, how you can compartmentalize and keep yourself a little bit more sane when things are peaking and valleying when it comes to a hometown team like the Eagles. Does that play in for other Eagle fans in this way? As J-Mac just put it, we really should be looking at the guy at the top of the pyramid, Jeff Lurie. Yeah. Well, it's better for Eagles fans to look at the second level of the pyramid because there could be a change there. If you really think that position is being done really poorly and that the Eagles need to make a change in that area, that's a possibility. Howie Roseman could get fired. As ridiculous as it sounds right now with the relationship he has with the owner, he looks like he's almost got a lifetime job. But at one point, Jeff Lurie did send him off to the other side of the building to hand the keys to the car to Chip Kelly. So you never really know, although it looks like right now Howie's in pretty damn good position. Yeah. If you're hoping for that guy to potentially be changed, at least you've got hope. At least you can hang your hat on something. There's nothing to do about the owner. It's his team. Yeah. And I don't see Jeff Lurie selling it anytime soon. I don't believe the fans of Philadelphia could pressure Jeff Lurie into selling it. I think he likes being the owner of the Philadelphia Eagles, unlike a bunch of other owners in the league who have major business interests above and beyond their owning of their football team. Jeff Lurie's job is the owner of the Philadelphia Eagles. So do you think that's why one of the reasons why people focus on Howie Roseman, because they believe we could actually make enough noise and affect change and get Howie Roseman fired, whereas you can't do that with Jeff Lurie.
Well, yeah, and especially, Jody, because I look at the last couple of years as being totally unique outliers in the way that they approach roster building, too. Because, I mean, obviously, Jeffrey Lurie in his postseason press conference basically said something to the effect of, look, we probably wouldn't have done some of the things that we did if we weren't chasing another ring. So they were in a mode that they typically are not in, and they wouldn't have extended Alshon Jeffrey, given these other guys these contracts they give. They didn't think they could run it back with that Super Bowl team. So now we've taken that epoch, that era, and we've squarely removed it and put it off to the side. And now we're in a straight up rebuild transitional phase where the GM is going to be doing things that he was normally doing, pre-Super Bowl. I think it's a different kind of judgment on the last couple of years, and people are upset about that because they reach the top and they show that they're a Super Bowl champion. They're this team. And they couldn't sustain it. They didn't know what to do once they got there. So now we're kind of falling back to a mindset and a strategy of what Howie Roseman was previously. So now you're judging him on something different, but all eyes are on him, because the goal is different. The goal is not going to be to win a Super Bowl. The goal is going to be, can they put a competing roster together again? So it exposes him in a way because now he's front and center. Doug Pederson was the fall guy originally. He's not here anymore. Carson Wentz is not here anymore. Okay, so all of the focus is definitely going to be on Howie Roseman. That's just funny to me because I think John can relate to this, but when you're a writer for a while, you become a little bit disconnected and jaded and burned out. And it's just easier for you to take a step back, right? We don't look at it in the same way as this emotional, knee-jerk reaction as the fans do. But I do think they're justified in feeling let down by this because once you get to the top, you want to stay there, and they just fell completely down to the bottom. So I think we're just able to look at it in a certain detached and unique way. But I don't fault fans at all for feeling the way that they do.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a good point, Kevin. You brought up the White House kerfuffle. That one is interesting to me because I look back at that in hindsight. And Doug Pederson was sent out there with no information. He didn't make any of the decisions. I got in a bit of a public kerfuffle with him behind the scenes. I said, look, Jeffrey should be talking about this, not you.
Yeah. Especially not, I'm sorry, not to cut you off, but especially because at the time he was seen as one of the more pragmatic and forward thinking and kind of progressive guys who understood, who was able to speak with some level of eloquence about these complicated issues, especially at the time when Malcolm Jenkins was front and center for a lot of that stuff too.
Yeah. And, my point moving forward is Nick Sirianni is going to be put in these situations. Now, hopefully it's not that bad, but the point is you brought up sort of the we'll keep the political bent going here. Sort of the shadow organization of Alec Calaby talking to, reporting to Jeffrey Lurie. A lot of times the head coach doesn't have information, but he's trotted out there and he's the face of the organization.
Yeah.
Sheil and Bo both talked about transparency. Now, transparency outside the organization, I think, is important. It's got to get better. But transparency inside the organization, that is the bigger issue and a whopper of an issue.
Yeah, and I don't think I don't think the average fan would understand this because they don't live in a media world like we do. But just like, for example, the coach is generally prepped by the public relations staff before they go out and they do a hit, okay? But it's not some big meeting where everybody's sitting there saying, okay, John McMullen wrote this, Sheil Kapadia wrote this. Like, they're aware of what's going on, but sometimes the strategy is not totally cohesive from top to bottom. So the PR staff says, here's what people are talking about today. What are you going to say about it, And then they trot them out there, right? But there's no generally there's no top to bottom kind of thing saying, hey, Jeffrey thinks you should say this and Howie thinks you should say this. So then when the coach with little information goes out to face the media, it might not necessarily be saying what Howie thinks he should say or what Jeffrey thinks he should say. That's why I wrote in the story that I wrote yesterday, if you find me an organization, a sports franchise, a media outlet, a business in any sector where everybody is 100% on the same page and everybody 100% gets along, you have a unicorn. Like, it never happens. Now people operate in a very efficient way regardless. I was at Channel 3 for many, many years when we had an anchor who punched a cop in the face and then just had somebody else who was fired, an executive, for saying bad things about Yuki Washington. Yeah. But we still put a good product on TV every night. Jody came and did TV with us on Sunday nights. So regardless of all the stuff that's going on in the background, the powers that be kind of are able to make it work within that framework. But to your point, John, right, I don't think people realize how staggered and unstructured it can be internally.
And Kevin, to a lesser extent, that's what I constantly said about Carson Wentz. Look, you get 65 people together. Not everybody's going to like everybody. That's just common sense.
No, even like on a daily basis, like, maybe Kyle will say something to me. Do you think this is a story? No, I don't think it's a story. Do you think this is a story? No, but everybody finds common ground to work with and get it through there. That's why I thought it was interesting with the Carson thing. I thought Malcolm Jenkins and Chris Long said it the best. The dude's not a locker room cancer. Okay, but we just wanted him to kind of like go to other corners of the locker room and just make more of an effort to understand these guys, So they went out on the field in 2017 and they played an amazing game, but they weren't all best friends. Like, that's natural stuff. I think that everybody's of this misnomer of when a team is playing really well, like everybody's 100% clicking all on the same page, all buying into the same thing, because that's an ultra rarity in anything.
And it's a big roster. That's a lot of people to try and get at least on some level agreement with, and it's virtually impossible, as you pointed out. And you're right, Channel 3 is actually still broadcasting, despite the fact that they put me on a bunch of Sunday nights. Still not sure how that came about. All right, let's get back into the football side of it.
Yeah.
We are 2 weeks away from an NFL draft, a key one for the Eagles. They had a very high pick at number 6. They've now dropped down to number 12, which is a pretty darn high pick unto itself. Johnny Mac and I have a disagreement. Let's let you weigh in. I'm going to answer some every guess between now and the next 2 weeks.
Well, wait, what side are you on?
Well, you can figure it out for yourself. Johnny Mac believes that the Eagles are going to stay to their drafting DNA, their history. When they're up as high as they are at number 12, first half of the draft in the first round, they keep it inside. They go to the trenches. They don't go to the outsides. They go inside. I think they're going outside. I think it's a foregone conclusion that they're taking either a cornerback or a wide receiver. I think they will not spit in the face of, but break with the trend of what they've done historically, basically because the draft board says they should and the need of the team says that they should. Or are they going to say, no, we'll drop down again and make sure we get the best available player at the position that we have to draft at if we're in the first half? How do you see the Eagles position-wise using their number 12 pick?
Yeah, originally I didn't like the move because I was sitting there thinking, look, I mean, if you're Howie Roseman and you got a spotty draft history, the severity of moving back from 6 to 12 it's a lot easier to miss at 12 than it is at 6. Like, you could have had one of Chase, Sewell, Pitts there, no problem, if we knew that 3 quarterbacks were going 1 through 3. But look, I mean, picking up the extra first-round pick gives them, I'll use Daryl Morey's favorite word, which is not a word, optionality right, for next year, that if Jalen Hurts is not the guy this year, then you're in position to do something next year. So I think they just did it trying to kick the can down the road, looking ahead to seeing what options they had if Jalen Hurts was not going to pan out. But at number 12, I would just sit there and I'd take the best player available. Cornerback, if Surtain is there at 12, that's what I would do. Micah Parsons, well, I mean, they'll never get a drafted linebacker in the first round anyway, so I don't think that's going to happen. But still, the way it's going to play out with the run on quarterbacks going up is that they're probably going to get a top 8 player at any other, the rest of the board, top 8 non-quarterbacks, they're going to have one of those dudes. So I still don't think that Howie can screw it up. I mean, I'm probably going to jinx it, but, I've said a million times before, not even Howie Roseman can screw this draft up. But if you end up with the number 1 cornerback and an extra draft pick next year, I don't know how anybody can be disappointed with that. I mean, you're going to miss out maybe on a generational kind of guy like a Chase or a Pitts or a Sewell, but they're not one generational guy away. So, to me, it was more about adding capital and draft stock and giving yourself options in the future. So I don't have any problem with what they did.
And speaking about those options of the future, Kevin, that says something about Jalen Hurts in my mind. This team is building up a big safety net. So, I mean, they're crossing their fingers because they want that young quarterback on a rookie contract. But the reality is, Deshaun Watson, who knows what happens there? Maybe his allegations are cleared up. Russell Wilson. There's talk, Aaron Rodgers, it is building right now about him potentially going to Denver. If any of these quarterbacks are available, plus you have all that draft capital and money to go up at the top 10 of the draft for a rookie quarterback, what does Jalen Hurts have to do? Can Jalen Hurts do anything to seize this position?
Go out and play like a superstar. I mean, there's going to be no pressure on his shoulders. I mean, he's got Joe Flacco behind him, right? Okay, so unless they go out and draft a quarterback, they've eliminated the situation that they created last year. So I got to be honest with you guys, and this might sound really stupid, but I'm really excited for this Eagles season. Just for the fact that I don't know what anything is.
Just the newness of it.
The newness. We had shed. Yeah, I would sit there and write these games on Sundays, and I'd be home with my wife. She'd be chasing our 2-year-old around, and I'd be miserable. I'd be like, I cannot watch another game of this slop. And Twitter arguing about Carson Wentz, and having to hear about Nick Foles again and Doug Pederson and all this stuff. They wiped the slate clean of all of that. So I don't know a damn thing about Nick Sirianni or what Jalen Hurts is going to be. I watched him hang 55 on my team in person. That was the game in Oklahoma where the wagon fell over. I don't know if you guys saw that video, but I saw that in person. But I'm excited because I don't know what any of this is. So I'm going into it with zero expectations, And remember, 2017, we went in with zero expectations too. And those are the most exciting years that you can have because you can't when you don't have any expectations, you can't be disappointed. So I don't, Nick Sirianni may not be that great. Jalen Hurts may not be that great. But right now I'm looking at this team and saying it's the great unknown. And I'm intrigued by that because I don't know what the hell any of these guys are. And I don't know what they're going to do in the draft. So it's kind of rejuvenated me. It's brought back my lifeless corpse. And now I'm actually interested in writing about the team again for the first time in a while,
KK, I'm glad it's working for you. And it sounds like you got a pretty good grasp on things. But Eagle Nation on a large scale is not like you. They want expectations. They need expectations.
That's have
one
expectations.
Of the problems right now with Nick Sirianni in that I don't know that anybody knows enough about him to have expectations.
No.
They're trying to judge how he handles himself in press conferences, and that is going to decide how good or bad a coach Nick Sirianni is. Of course it's not. It's going to be what he does on Sunday afternoons, but the people have to have expectations in this town ahead of time. Just sitting back and going, well, we'll get the judge. That's not Eagle Nation. It might be Kincade, but it's not Eagle Nation. Fans don't handle it that way.
I am generally a lot more blunt and a lot more pragmatic than the average Eagles fan. But I don't blame them for feeling that way because you're a professional football team. You're supposed to be competitive every year. You're supposed to restock and rebuild. You're not supposed to have transitional years, But the funny thing about Nick Sirianni is listen, okay. Would anybody call Doug Pederson a master of the spoken word? No. Okay. So I have this kind of weird take. I'll try it on you guys and you tell me what you think. Nick Sirianni has this excitable, dorky football lover kind of thing, right? But I think he does it in a way that's
ball, Kevin.
He loves ball. But he does it in a way that I think is kind of endearing. You hope that energy and enthusiasm kind of rubs off on the team and that energizes them too. The difference between him and a guy like a Joe Judge or a James Franklin is that these guys are like, real leaders of men, football guys too, right? But I feel like sometimes they talk at you or have this delivery where it's like a lecture, like we don't know what the hell we're talking about. Like, no, we're going to send the tight end over here, right? And these men are going to go out and play hard, right? Like, I think they're all football lover kind of guys, but when Nick Sirianni talks, I don't feel like he's talking down to me or talking at me or anything like that. So my hope is that obviously he'll become a better communicator with experience, but we know that. But that the infectious energy kind of rubs off on these guys. It energizes these guys, especially in a younger locker room anyway. Like Jason Kelsey might look at Nick Sirianni and say, who the hell is this guy? Yeah. But, Jalen Hurts and Jalen Reagor might say, yeah, let's go. So, yeah. I mean, that's the best hope that I can have for him,
Well, the guy's got great energy, no question about it. I think it can go in two ways. I mean, let's be honest. And it all comes down like it always does, winning or losing. If he wins football games, they'll take your tact and say, this guy's great. He's got everybody motivated. They're running through brick walls behind me and Jody. If he loses, then you'll hear, oh, what is he doing? This is high school. These are professionals. That kind of stuff. So it all comes down, does he produce? And, one thing I will say about this staff, one thing I criticized, I'm a Doug Pederson guy. I like the guy. I mean, who doesn't like him? But I don't think his staff developed young players well at all. Mm-hmm. This group is very young. Maybe they can connect a little bit better with the Jalen Reagors and the J.J. Arcega-Whitesides of the world. Maybe they can develop. I think we're coming up to the draft. Too many people assume you hand in that card and you get a finished product. It doesn't end there. You got to develop those players. And I think that's what will define Nick Sirianni.
I think so too. And I mean, like you look at the NBA and like what the Sixers have with Paul Reed now. Before it was thought that development in the NBA was nothing. And then they started putting more resources and time and effort into the G League. And now you see guys coming through there as well. Look at the Philadelphia Union bringing a bunch of local kids through the academy. Now they're playing on the field at 19 years old. I mean, that's going to be important regardless of your draft record too, because even if you have guys who we think are misses, maybe they don't develop on a linear path. And maybe they have 2 years where they don't get it and then it clicks in year number 3, So to me, my biggest concern, if you're talking about the stuff in Jeff McClain's article, the Athletic article or whatever, I don't care about the dysfunction or the lack of communication behind the scenes because that happens everywhere. To me, they got to get the draft right, and it's Howie being on one page, the scouting staff being on another page, and them not being able to kind of put it together. I was doing something on the site yesterday. Somebody on Reddit noted that they haven't drafted a single Alabama player in the Nick Saban era.
Time. Yeah.
96 draft picks that Bama has had. But if you go back over the Eagles' last 5 drafts, their top 3 picks. Well, let me ask you this. What do you think is the best conference in college football?
The SEC. Not a difficult question.
They've drafted one SEC player with their top
12 people.
No, and I watch the Big 12 every week because my team plays in the Big 12, and it's not a good league.
Pac-12, but Big 12 as well. But,
Big 12, yeah. But that's the thing. It's like the GM doesn't have to like the scouting director, who doesn't necessarily have to like the Black Ops analytics guy. But you know what? If they get the draft right, then none of that matters.
And I was telling Jody, I'll jump in. Sorry, Jody, and I'm getting wordy, but to me, the biggest problem with the Eagles is when we're done with this draft, we're going to have a couple Laurie picks, a couple Roseman picks, an Alec Calaby pick, and some Andy Weidel picks. They have to be Eagles picks.
Yeah.
But to me, there's no consensus.
No, and that's always the hardest thing for us in the media, because how do we parse that? And how do we package it? Because then it's all going to come to, Howie can't draft. Well, I don't know who the hell he drafted. Yeah. We had this problem too when I was covering the Union, because they'd scout all these different players with 4 different people. I don't know who scouted him. I know who the GM is, but I don't know which member of the front office went out to England and actually watched that guy play. So that's the problem that we have with that. But I mean, all I can say is that when you went back at the 2017 team and you look at the makeup of schools that those guys came from, it was a blend. They had Pac-12 guys on the offensive side, but they had on the defensive end, they had 4 dudes from Florida State, Mississippi State, Tennessee, Ohio State. Okay, they haven't drafted a single Alabama player since Saban's been there. They drafted one Ohio State player who was Brian Roll. They drafted one Clemson player who was Kayvon Wallace, and that's it. I mean, they've gone Big 12, 5 Big 12, 5 Pac-12 guys, 3 Big 12 guys, 2 guys from the Dakotas, and they just sort of are all over the place. They just got to like simplify it.
I don't put as much stock into what conference a guy is taken from. I think your Alabama point holds water because they are the best program every single year. How do we not have one guy from that university? But the conference stuff can be overrated. Patrick Mahomes is the most valuable player in the National Football League. He didn't play in the SEC.
And I wasn't even that impressed with him when I watched him play at Texas Tech, which is the most ironic.
I thought his mechanics were terrible. I get freezing cold take on that every year.
Yeah, we were playing at West Virginia. We played this like weird 3-3-5 stack, right? Where you have like a bandit safety or like a spur safety. So, you bring that guy down on the line, and that's how you get 4 players down on the line. But we played this stupid like 3-3-5 web where we just dropped 8 into coverage, and Patrick Mahomes looked like he didn't know what he was doing. And then 3 years later, he's winning the Super Bowl. So you're right, Jody, in a way that it's like some of that stuff doesn't matter if you have generational talent. But I think for college football people like me, we just get obsessed with the like my conference is better than your conference kind of thing, Well,
I also think it worked in reverse with Patrick Mahomes. People assumed he was always that good. Andy Reid has a lot to do with that as well. Player development, being right system, right scheme. I mean, phenomenal talent, but I don't think it would have worked the same with Adam Gase, for instance.
Yeah, it's true. And I mean, look, is Jalen Reagor different with Nick Sirianni? Like looking at a little bit of the Colts offense, they did a good job of kind of getting guys in space, use their tight ends a little bit more, misdirection and kind of just looking at maximizing skill players and letting them do their thing. So I don't, like change of scenery. I mean, maybe that's it. It's just hard. I remember going back to the days of the old Big East when we were rated by the ACC. We were fighting for our lives. We were saying Louisville's good and West Virginia's good and whatever, So I think that kind of bleeds out a little bit when you look at who the Eagles have drafted over the years and you say, look, common knowledge would say if the SEC is damn good, just take SEC players. And if the Big Ten's good, then take those players. And Miles Sanders is the only Big Ten guy that they've drafted over the last 5 years too. So go figure, in the top 3 picks.
KK, a recurring question here on Birds 365, and it will be until a resolution is decided. Zach Ertz is still a Philadelphia Eagle, even though certain quarters have had him traded any minute now for weeks, if not months. He's still on the Eagles. We understand the situation and that he could be used on draft day to move up in the run. Could have to wait till after the draft because if the Eagles actually want a draft pick of any import, they're going to have to wait till 2022. He's not happy here. He's outspoken about it, but Howie Roseman hasn't pulled the trigger on him. His league-wide interest is what it is. Is there any way that these two sides can kiss and make up with a new head coach in place who Zach Ertz shouldn't be mad at? We know he can be mad at the organization. He can't be mad at the new head coach. Is there a chance that Zach Ertz is back with the Eagles in 2021?
I mean, if it is, it's with the understanding that like, hey, you're playing with a young quarterback. We're kind of turning the corner here. Maybe you don't necessarily have a future beyond this year, but we'd like you to be a part of this transition rebuilding year and help us move it forward. How much time does Jason Kelce have left? Not a ton. He's talked openly about retirement, but I think the misnomer here is that you go into these rebuilding phases with a bunch of 22-year-olds. Jalen Hurts is going to get killed if he doesn't have anybody good to throw to or any veterans on the offensive line blocking for him. So there's value in if you can't get anything for Ertz, if you can't get what you want for him, there's really no harm in bringing him back and letting Jalen Hurts throw him the ball because you can't evaluate a guy if he's throwing to a bunch of nobodies, or if you have a first-year center in there. So, I mean, if that's the glass half empty take or that's a worst-case scenario kind of take, it's not the worst thing in the world. This is not like the process Sixers where you just roll out 10 dudes who are on 10-day contracts and go out and lose by 30 points. You can't get a real evaluation of what Jalen Hurts is if he doesn't have something to work with. So, I mean, if Zach Ertz came back and they didn't get anything for him, whatever. But, I mean, that's my way of looking at it in a positive way, I guess.
All right, Kevin, we probably kept you too long. So
no, it's all right.
Go be a dad, go be a content machine. But real quick, what do I expect out of the Philadelphia Union this year? Give me a little Union.
Well, they just won 4-0 in the Champions League last night, which was insane to me. You know, they are not your grandmother's Philadelphia Union, who 5 years ago didn't even have a practice facility. But I would say to people who aren't really into soccer, who don't watch the team, they're easy to appreciate because they have a lot of local kids who play for them. They come through the academy in King of Prussia. They are from this region. They're our kind of guys, and they play well. And they just play a really blue-collar, collective team defense kind of game. They work hard. What other cliches can I give you? The lunch, they carry the lunch pail. You know, they got the hard hat or whatever. But truly, they play like that. And if you're not a soccer fan, you could probably at least appreciate the hard-nosed way they play the game. But they're really fun to watch after years of being not very good. So they've turned a corner in a hard way.
He covers it all. He writes about it all on crossingbroad.com. KK, Kevin Kincade, thank you for hopping on Birds 365. We'll get you back up again soon enough.
Anytime, guys. Just let me know, all right?
Kevin Kincade here with us on Birds 365. All right, quickie timeout, come back. Yes, we've got plenty of Eagles to talk about, but a little pushback back and forth between the NFLPA and the league itself. There's going to be some issues before we get this season underway. The draft is upcoming, but off-season workouts are supposedly upcoming. Maybe not. We'll talk about it with John McMullen and Jody McDonald right here on Birds 365 next.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.